Let's dig into compressors on drum buses. So normally you would set up your mix and then have all the drums feed into a bus, feed into a single channel or a bus, and that has a compressor on it, so it kind of keeps things within range of where you're looking to. The nice thing about setting it up that way is then you can kind of control the overall drums, how loud they're getting, and you can add a flavor to the overall drums. And a lot of the times your drum sound comes from whatever compressor you're putting on the drum bus. I bounced out a very simple drum mix that doesn't have any compression on it, so we could just dig in without having to worry about the individual parts. Here's the basic groove. Here's a thicker part. And you can hear Charlie here, Charlie Zeleny, Drumageddon Charlie, is a very consistent drummer. So the nice thing about how he plays is the snare hits are very consistent. There's not a lot. When it's quieter or louder, it's because he was doing it on purpose. He's recorded a lot of albums, and that makes my job as the engineer a lot easier, because all of a sudden I'm not compressing for controlling dynamic range of the playing because he did that as a human. I'm compressing for tone reasons. So let's listen to the groove section. And we're gonna start out by doing a standard glue compressor. So I've got my standard SSL style glue compressor, slow attack, fast release. With it, without it. With it, without it. Now, obviously there's some makeup gain here, so I'm going to take the makeup gain off, and that's always important to remember. Do I have makeup gain on? So am I thinking it's better just because it's a little louder from the makeup gain? So makeup gain down, here's off, on, off, on. We'll bring up the makeup gain a little bit. And you can hear how it's bringing the drums forward a little bit because I'm letting that attack through and I'm compressing right after the attack. We can do that with any compressor. You don't have to just use this one. So I've got, for fun, I set up, here is, a paid for fancy SSL style compressor. Here is the Chandler limited germanium comp. Here, I know there's a lot of plugins, but I want to get to a point. So here's the Shadow Hills compressor, mastering compressor plugin. And then here is the Chandler limited Zener compressor. So a lot of different plugins, and they're all parallel, and I can switch between them with this solo button here. So starting with the glue compressor standard, Townhouse, Chandler, Shadow Hills, the Zener. And you can hear how there's little differences, but it's not like the difference is enough to be crazy and buy all the plugins really fast. Where you really start to appreciate the difference between these different tools is when you've used them for a while. So I would never recommend to somebody to buy a bunch of plugins and then just start throwing them everywhere, because you're really not going to get the flavors out of them quickly. You're not going to learn how to use them in a way that emphasizes the flavor of that compressor. So And we can do that again. Let's listen to it again. And you'll hear that, yeah, there's some differences, but it's not earth-shattering differences. So starting with the glue. Townhouse. Germanium. Shadow Hills. Zener. And you can hear how, yes, the different compressors sound different, but again, it's not earth-shattering. So how do you emphasize the tone of these things so you figure out which one do I want on my drum bus? And one of the things to play with, the good starting place, and you'll notice all of these are set with, besides the Chandler, and if you noticed, that's the one that sounded the most different. The rest of them have a slow attack and a fast release, but when we switched to this one, we noticed it more because it had a different attack and release times. And that's where a lot of the different feel to compression comes from, is just where the attack and release times is. So let's kind of mess around with it now and be more like this Chandler was, which is the glue attack. So we're going to do a medium attack and a semi-fast release. So we'll do 1 on the attack and 0.2 on the release. Listen to it now. Without. Obviously it's doing more work, so I'm going to bring up the makeup gain. You hear how it obviously it's much more compressed, and that's where you start to feel the compression in different ways. So let's just slow down the attack a little bit. I'm going to keep it playing and start with the attack as fast as possible, and then we'll go to slow with the release staying fast as possible. You hear how once I get to that 1, attack of 1, it suddenly starts feeling really compressed. It starts squashing those drums. But as soon as I started going past the 1 to 3 to 30, the drums felt like they were kind of coming forward a little bit. And that's because I'm letting more of that initial hit through. The compressor isn't hearing that hit because the attack time is slower. It's just letting it through. So you can hear on this one, on this groove, I'm kind of liking this 10-second setting where it's like, okay, I'm getting a little bit of the squash, but it's not killing it, but it's giving me a little bit of that squash. And then let's just do the same thing with the release. So fastest release, you're going to hear the compressor the least amount because it's releasing quick. But the slower releases, we're going to hear it doing it more. So we'll leave the attack time and then start messing with the release. You hear how on the slower release times, it feels like the drums are kind of getting choked. The life isn't there as much, and that's because the release isn't quite done releasing by the time the next attack has happened. So we're compressing, we've turned down the volume, and the attack for the next hit happens while the volume's already turned down. So we've turned down our volume, and a drum hits, and then we are just going, oh, well, I guess I'll keep the volume down. So if the release hasn't let the volume back up by the time the next attack hits, you're going to be turning down that next attack a lot. So that's why faster release times are more transparent, and slower release times you hear the character or the compressor more. So like on this groove, where there's not too much going on, I don't mind having a little bit slower release, but even once we get to 0.8, you really hear it. And this feels like it's not as much life in it as when I go here. And I kind of like the release somewhere between here. So I'd just set it on 0.1, especially for these kind of songs, because I know the song gets a lot busier right here. So let's listen to a more busy section. And I'm going to bring the threshold down so we're really hitting this thing. And you hear how that, it's just squashing it. But let's say we have this semi-fast release. You can hear how it's kind of pumping in a fun way, and let's just back off on our threshold. Now all of a sudden, like, we kind of played with this and we got our makeup gain. We're just bringing in the ring of these drums a little bit and letting the attack through more, and you can hear how the drums kind of get a little more exciting. And that's what I'm usually looking for drum bus compression. I'm trying to make my drums a little bit more exciting, but make it so the overall swing of the volume of the drums isn't crazy, like it's going loud, loud, and then soft, soft. I do want to kind of bring down the loudest part so it all stays within the same range, and then I bring up the quiet parts with the makeup gain, so it's all kind of closer. Without. You hear how it feels like it comes forward a bit with that compressor on. And that's what I'm looking for a bus compressor. I don't want it to be working hard. I usually am looking for, you know, a dB, maybe 2 dB of compression on a bus compressor, and even less than that usually. But let's do this same thing with another compressor, just to show the same idea of you just play with your attack and release times until you bring out the flavor. Really helps. We'll listen to this section with a bunch of toms, and this time let's play with the germanium one. So here's with slow attack, fast release. And first I'm going to set the attack time. And on this one, you notice when the attack's fast, it's getting like this weird flub almost. That's because it's attacking and then it's releasing fast. So you get that weird like pump where you get an almost second attack right after. Listen to that closely. It's almost like the room sound is getting louder. So we want to back up. Sometimes that can be really cool where you're emphasizing the room sound. I kind of like it there, you know, just controlling those toms are really ringy right now. And I'm going to slow down my release. That's too much. And you notice it suddenly feels less cluttered around here with the release. So that's because the release is mostly done releasing by the next big tom hit. And you can see that in the gain reduction meter here. So the release is fast enough to be done by the next big tom hit, but it's still keeping the volume down in the in-between section. So it almost makes those big tom hits feel bigger because I'm letting that attack through again, because we have a little bit slower attack. So we're letting that attack through, but then we're keeping it down during this middle part of the bar, and then it comes back up for the next attack. So listen again closely. And then we'll take this compressor out. Obviously, I got to change my output gain. So listen to, with this compressor in, with this kind of faster attack than you normally would do, and a medium release. In, out. Out. In. And you notice those snare hits suddenly feel a lot more forward. Listen to that snare hit again. Here's with it in. Here's with it out. In. Out. So it's like suddenly the snare is a little tighter, the room sound is a little more controlled, and this will sit in a mix better. And this is probably over compressing more than I would normally do it, but I'm emphasizing for lesson purposes. So let's get into another thing on drum bus compression. So obviously I want you to play with this on your own, but as you play with it, you'll notice that you can adjust the character of the drums a lot by whatever compressor is on that all those drums are feeding into. So what I normally do is I get a rough balance of the drums of like, hey, this is kind of where I like them, and I don't dig in too much into the EQing and stuff yet. I'll throw my bus compressor on then, so I get that tone of the bus compressor, and then I'll go back and start really EQing on the drums. Because if you EQ a bunch, you throw your compressor on, then you're going to feel like you need to go back and change things. So you kind of end up chasing your tail, versus you go, okay, basic mix of the drums, so I have an idea of what they'll be doing. Pick my compressor for the drum bus, and then I can go in and fine tune those drums a little better. And that way you're not spending a bunch of time trying to figure out the tone, because you want to, when you're mixing, you want to get to where you're going as quickly as possible, so you don't get ear fatigue, so you don't get too accustomed to the sounds, and you can't be objective anymore, because that's a lot of mixing, is being objective about what's going on. So you want to be able to kind of move fast. So it's good to have that workflow of, hey, I've got my bus compressor, it's giving me my tone, and then is there anything that's bugging me EQ wise? Okay, I'll fix that really quick and then move on to the rest of the song. Don't sit there and spend a day trying to get a perfect drum sound, because by the time you get that perfect drum sound, once you add in the rest of the mix, you're going to be changing it anyways, and by then you're going to be sick of the song. So just, move on with it. I know we're digging in a lot right now, but you use this time as learning your tools time, and then when you're actually mixing a song that you really care about, you can be quick about it. Let's dig into another part of bus compression, and that is if the side chains are linked of the compressor. So what I mean by that is you can determine what the compressor is listening to, and that's called the sidechain. You're saying, hey, you're listening to this signal. Now, with a bus compressor, obviously I've got stuff going on in the right and the left, right? And you can decide how much of the left signal the right can hear when it's compressing, when it's deciding to compress or not. And a lot of compressors most of them will let you turn it so they can't hear each other at all, or it will be, I can hear the other side just fine and I hear it the same. So, but some will let you dial in a chosen amount. So and this is one of them. This is Compassion by DMG. It's kind of if you really want to geek out on all your settings type compressor. Let's set up just a basic one. I'll just do a 2-to-1 setting, kind of that 30 millisecond attack, faster release time. Compressor out, compressor in. So it's getting a good compressor tone, probably a little over compressed, but we want to hear what it's doing. So if I set it so the detector, you can say, so this left one is only going to hear itself and this right one's only going to hear itself. So listen to it now. So you can hear how it's a lot more transparent now with them not hearing each other. Here's equal. You can hear how, since it's only listening to the one side it's compressing, so the right is only listening to the right channel, the left is only listening to the left channel, all of a sudden it's more transparent because it's not trying to work as hard because it's not listening to the other half. And so a lot of the times I will usually, if it's all or nothing, I'll usually not have the side chains linked for most things, and then I mix into it. The downside of this is if I have something going on that's heavy on one side, it's going to be compressing a lot on that side, and the other side's not going to be compressing. So you'll hear the room sound come up a lot more on the other side, so it can kind of skew your stereo image. But while you're mixing, you can do volume automation around that and stuff, and you can pan things accordingly. So as long as you're not over compressing, you don't really hear that effect very often, and you'll get a more transparent compressor with it not linked. But what's fun about compressors that let you play with how much linkage there is you can kind of let's bleed in a little bit of the other. So 4 dB, we'll do 2 dB of self minus 8 of other. So this way it's a little tighter because they both hear the other side a little more, but it's not as overly tight as when we were in the middle like this. You hear how here I get a little more rocking back and forth. It's subtle, but it's an interesting thing to play with. And just to finish up this drum bus compression on how important attack and release times are, one of the fun things about this plugin is it lets you change the attack and release slopes, because different compressors are going to have a different slope of how they turn the volume back up or turn the volume down. Some will be exponential is what it's called, so they're using exponential math. Some will do it logarithmically. Some have a little bit of character where they're not going to be a straight line down when they attack and a straight line back up. It's kind of got a curve to it. So on this, we can actually go in and change our attack type and our release type, and just listen to what happens with the exact same settings when I start playing with those attack and release types. And then we'll change our curve law. Hear how it feels totally more thuddy there? And we'll increase the ratio a bit so we can really hear this, but if you really want to dig into what these are doing, you can download the demo of this. Their manual online explains it, but this is if you want to geek out on compression style. But you can hear how it suddenly feels like a totally different type of compression just by having different attack and release curves. And a lot of the times that's the sound of the compressors, is just a different curve on the attack and release or a different kind of analog knee. So I prefer to play with this where I can dial that in instead of having to have a billion plugins that I'm cycling through with different settings. It makes life a lot easier just to have a tool that can let you adjust that attack and release curve in-house, or you find a colored compressor you really like, that you like the sound of that attack and release, and you just really dig into its sound and learn what you can get out of it. Because again, the biggest mistake I see, and I made this myself, is you go and get a bunch of plugins, you don't really learn what they sound like, and you just keep buying new plugins or downloading new plugins for free and demoing them, and you're kind of robbing yourself of what they can do because you didn't dig in to really learn them. I think it's better to just get one or two compressor plugins, or just use the ones that the DAW came with, really learn them, and then maybe try out another one if you feel like you need it. But you'd be amazed at how much you can get out of any compressor once you start learning its quirks. So anyways, food for thought. Have some fun with it.